رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
والسلام على رسول الله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي واجعلني وزيرا من أهلي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Today's topic is a little bit different from what we've been doing, but I think it's very central to what we've been doing, because today's topic is about the why. Okay, it's literally, because oftentimes we tell people about the ahkam and how it's followed upon us to implement the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to establish His authority on it, and iqamat al-deen and Khilafah. We talked about all these terms. And yet, when you ask people in details, there's very little knowledge about what these things actually mean. There's a lot of misconceptions about what these things actually mean. So, this lecture is going to be a bit of a twofold. First, we're going to go over what exactly we mean by an Islamic political order. Okay? And then we're going to talk about, and after we talk about Islamic political order, then we're going to say how is that implementable today? And how that looks like today. What are the benefits of it today? Like, today's session is a bit of a dreaming session. I want you to imagine, I want you to envision it. Okay? So it's about creating that vision of tomorrow. Okay? And of course, this is the first time we're talking about this, so I want your inputs as well. So how do you imagine if tomorrow it becomes an Islamic empire? What do you imagine life for you will change as? What are some of the things that will change for you? We'll talk about those things, right? So let's try to make, if we can't visualize it, it's never going to happen. So today's session is about visualizing this reality, and the first part is going to be talking about what are the principles of an Islamic state. Okay. Now, this is where I want to start from today is vision of tomorrow under Islam. Okay. And if you can notice, I cut out political order. Why? Because it's only nowadays where you have to make a distinction between Islam and Islamic political order. If I was talking in the past, there would be no need to call it something different. I say living under Islam is finished. It means it comes with the political order. Okay, that's how it's understood. There's never distinction. But so if you go to the books of fiqh, if you go into the books of Islamic jurisprudence, you try to look into you won't never find a separate section on siyasa or political order. It's all embedded within Islam. That is what Islam is. Right? That's how they view it. So that's why I thought it's a very important point to start the session with. So we're going to look at the principles of the Khilafah and what would that look like today. So this is two parts. Misconceptions about Khilafah, right? Like I said, often at times we confuse the substance over the form. Okay, we don't know what the substance is, but we only see the outward. This looks like a Khilafah. Is it a Khilafah? You know, everything outwardly appears to us to be like that. But in reality, do we have enough knowledge to actually assess whether something is on the principles that are required or not? And what is important, this is an economic phrase, by the accounting phrase, you guys, substance over form, right? So we look at transactions and we look at what is in accounting, we look at what is actually happening, what is the substance behind this transaction. Don't forget about the form, forget they put it in, they put it under assets or put it under, expenses. What's actually taking place here? So we try to look at, so here, exactly, we try to do the same thing. We try to look at what is the substance of the Khilafah and what is the forms that it may take. Because oftentimes we confuse it, and the form becomes more important than the substance of the ordeal. So a common misconception we often hear about Islam, about a Khilafah or Islamic political order, is that we think a Khilafah must be under one Khalifa. There must be one supreme leader that governs the whole Islamic world. Okay? And if that's the case, then everything else is good. Right? And that is only a very minor part of what a Khilafah means. And it's not even necessary. Okay? As you will see through the course of today's session. And we often impose this is a system against the people. Okay? People want democracy, no, we're going to impose Khilafah. So this is some of the misconceptions that come with this today. And of course our friend here didn't really help the cause, right? So he took the ignorance of the Muslims, and then he imposed our ignorance back upon us. And this is one of the greatest atrocities of the group ISIS and the people who use it in the media. Today if you go online, it's very sad. you go Islamic State, and you want to listen to your principles of Islamic State, or something, you want to just type in, you want to do your research, right? What are you going to find? You're going to find these guys beheading people, these guys shooting people, killing some, some type of outrageous acts they're doing without anything. So we, like we said, because it's our ignorance, we got occupied within the shape, the form of it, and we don't look at the substance behind it to evaluate it. So today, inshallah, we're going to look at the principles of Islamic government. But even before I talk about that, why do we need an Islamic government? Is this a term? Is this something that is explicitly mentioned in the Quran, instructing us to make an Islamic government? Is there any instruction in the Quran? You guys have read the Quran, I'm sure, in your lives, and we've been through it as well. Did you find any ayah which comes to your mind talking about Islamic government?
The ayah speaks about joining with other people who do good and
explicit. If it's such an important concept of the deen, I'm putting everything upon this concept. I think it's one of the biggest obligations upon us as Muslims. Then where is the explicit ayah in the Quran?
Do you say that somebody, even if you're going, you make somebody as your Amir? Can you leave with that one?
In one place it says
These are all complementary supporting evidences.
Kuffar will get together and work together for objective. Following it says, if you don't do the same, there will be fitna in the sea and
إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ, right? Surah Al-Anfal. But I'm talking about something. This means brotherhood. I think of this as brotherhood.
But I think
assist each other. Okay, that is now getting closer to something closer to. But that is talking about again implementation of Allah's law. It's not talking about government.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's one place where it says that you have to establish the deen for that.
That's supremacy of Allah's law.
More related to
Allah's law.
Supremacy of Allah's law.
Okay. Supremacy of Allah's law is mentioned, but establishing the government, not necessarily. Right?
Can the law exist without the government?
Okay, now this is exactly what I was trying to get to. So what's the principle of having any government? Forget Islamic government. Any government. What's the reason for having it?
To govern the law, to implement
that law.
To implement the law.
To implement the law. So the answer is no. You won't find any explicit thing, because, like I said, Islam and Islamic law is all embedded within Islam. Okay. Then why do we need this? And of course, the answer is very clear: because there are laws. How can you implement the laws without any government? It's very much conceivable that if you have a law, you necessarily need a government to implement it. Okay. So the answer is because Allah is the legislator, and He has legislated how human beings are to live their lives. There are laws, i.e. the Sharia, that needs to be implemented, and for this purpose, we need an Islamic government. Okay, to implement the Islamic laws. Okay, but today I'm going to challenge that even further. I'm going to say, is the law by itself the aim and the ultimate objective? Is implementation, I'm talking about Islamic law, Sharia, is implementing the Islamic law the ultimate aim and the objective?
No, it's a means to objective. The objective being that Allah's law is above other. Implementing that law itself is not the objective, it's a means to achieve that.
Yes, you're right.
Just to have a peaceful
in a
world,
way, you're right,
a pure world without fasad fitna.
Okay, yeah. So now, see, every law by its nature, now we're talking about Islamic law, any law by its nature is not, it's not the objective in itself. There's certain things, if you look at any culture's laws, if you look at them, it tells you a lot about that society, what things those people value. Okay? So our laws, even the word Sharia, okay, what does the word Sharia actually mean? The word Sharia, it means the way, okay, the path, okay, the path, because this is the path that takes you to an end. And what is that end? Number one, it is the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That's number one. Number two, it is the social justice which Allah has taught us how to live. If we don't implement those laws, we're gonna replace justice. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah says, become witnesses bil qist. Okay, stand up as witnesses for justice, for equity. Bil qist, right? Another place, Surah Nisa, He removes the qist with Allah. Shuhada lillah. Become witnesses for Allah, bil qist, for justice. So one place He removes Allah, but just puts qist, and one place He puts it for Allah, for justice. I.e. meaning that when you stand up for justice, you are standing up for Allah. Okay. So that social justice is the ultimate goal, which the Sharia tries to implement. Right? But we are not a society that just focuses on the outward appearance of the law and no actual reason and fit behind it. Okay, and you will find this throughout the implementation of the law throughout the history of Islam. Okay, again, they look at the substance over the form. Okay, so what do we want? We want a society that follows God's order. That is the ultimate objective, right? And for us, what that means is success in the hereafter and success in this world. And there's nothing more greater than this. Okay, this is very, very important. Because, when we're often talking about these things, this objective is missed. The objective of going to paradise. The objective of success in the hereafter. Okay, when you talk to your Westerners, when you talk to your colleagues, you can talk till the, as I say, the old lady sings, right? You basically talk till the end of the day about the benefits of the Islamic law versus Western law versus other law in a particular sphere. You talk about it. They'll present their arguments, you present your arguments. But one thing which is very central to Islam is Islam deals with not just this life but the next life to come. This is very much a reality. And without that second dimension, that whole dimensional view of the next life to come, any opinion you give is going to be one-dimensional. Okay, you might be right. There's a lot of benefits and manafia from the Sharia and from implementation of Allah's law, but ultimately it's also the other side of the coin. You have to look at what's beyond this. So success of the hereafter, and this becomes important because if you talk to someone, maybe not today, but maybe a decade ago or something, where West civilization probably at its peak in the 90s or on that time, a lot of growth was happening and all that. So during this time, we had discussions with Westerners about just to make them understand what the Islamic Sharia's objectives are. When we talk about their objectives, we said, in this society, in your society, which is focusing on the good of people, there's a welfare, there's welfare payments made to poor people, all these things, good things are happening in the Western society. If you just take this and you implement the 10 commandments which Allah has implemented in your Bible, you'll become more or less close to what we want, what is the objective of Islamic state. All you do is take the 10 commandments and implement them. First, number one, don't make shirk. Then don't kill. Then don't commit adultery. So all of those things then fall into place. If you also have that task at hand, if you also look at that side of the equation, okay? And in dunya, of course, the benefits of implementing Allah's law is number one, social justice, okay? Economic prosperity. How do we know this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, it says, if you implement Allah's law, He will open the rizq from the heavens and the earth. Okay? This is His promise He was to take things to the Yahud. So much, it's more valid for us. Okay? And a healthy society. What I mean by a healthy society, now you have one of the most developed countries in the world, the Scandinavian nations. But you'll also find the highest rate of suicide in those nations. Okay? There's that void. The purpose of life is missing. Until you don't give them the whole comprehensive solution to their lives, which encompasses the hereafter, and that purpose, then the human being is always going to feel void and devoid of things, even no matter how much material wealth you give him. Okay? So you find that these countries with the most advanced developments and in terms of worldly material, their population is committing the greatest amount of suicide and killing themselves. Okay, for society, so the 5 pillars of 10 commandments, and then of course the 5 pillars of Islam, which is very important for us to implement, get success in the hereafter, and also dawah and jihad. I put this in one category because once the Islamic state is established, then these are both in the same range. It's about expansion of that beautiful solution that you've implemented. It's about expansion of that, and that's through dawah and jihad. That's how you're going to do it. That's how the Sahaba do it. Objectives of an Islamic state. Number one is the implementation of the Sharia. This is summarized. Okay? Number one is the implementation of Sharia. Number two is the conveyance and spread of Islam. Okay? These are the two primary objectives of the establishment of Islamic state or political order. Now we're going to look at the 9 principles which a political structure, Islamic political structure, is built upon. Okay? Now we're getting into the body of today's talk. I've just said 9 to make it catchy, but there could be more. This is not an exhaustive list. Okay, this is just some of the main principles that we should all know as Muslims. Okay, number one is sovereignty of Allah. Allah is the source of all powers and law. It is Allah who knows what is good and what is bad for His servants. His say is final. Okay, sovereignty of law belongs to not the people, what the people decide. Okay, not what the king decides. Okay, not by royal family decree. It will not be like that. It's going to be ultimately, it's going to be by what Allah has. Sovereignty belongs to Allah. Okay. Sharia is the manifestation of the will of Allah. Okay. Of course, now Allah is not going to come down and say what He wants, right? So the Sharia law we have in the Quran and Sunnah, these things are the expression of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. This is number one. Number two. I think it's better to do it here. Okay.
ये ऑर्डर शासन देते हैं कि बैठते हैं
Take this one.
साथ आप बोलते हो
So the second principle of Islam's political structure is Khilafah of mankind. Okay, this is a trusteeship, popular vicegerency of man. Now we try to understand what the word vicegerency means, right? Well, vicegerency is an appointment by a higher power to go and implement their will on that area or that land. Okay, a dunyawi example to understand this is like is what we see when the British colonialism, and we see how the Queen used to send her vicegerents to places like the Indian subcontinent or other places like that, where they rule. So now it's not for the vicegerent to go to oppose the Queen. That would be the greatest rebellion. That would be a civil war. Right? That would be a rebellion. Similarly, mankind has been tasked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as His vicegerents on earth, to implement His law on earth, and to do His will on earth. Okay? So this is in Surah Al-Baqarah as well as Surah Al-An'am, and the ayahs are up there. So, but the important thing here is that human beings collectively hold this responsibility. And among the human beings as well, the believers. Of course, those who don't accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Lord, they're obviously out from this responsibility. Right? They have other things responsible before they come into this. So believers collectively are Allah's Khilafah fil ard, His vicegerents on earth. Okay. Now, to understand this point a little further, there's a hadith, a popular hadith. It's about the end of times and the return of Isa alayhi salam. This hadith has been narrated on the authority of Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, that I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, a group of my ummah will fight for the truth until near the day of judgment when Isa, the son of Maryam, will descend. And the leader of them will ask him to lead the prayer. But Isa alayhi salam will decline, saying, verily, among you Allah has made leaders one from another, and He has bestowed His bounty upon them. Okay, you understand what I'm trying to say here? Isa bin Maryam, when he comes as the Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, he's going to read Salah behind, we know from the narration, it's Mahdi, from other narrations. But the leader, Mahdi, he's coming back to the road. Okay, and Isa says, no, you, this ummah, your ummah, you are leaders one of another. It doesn't matter who leads. You are leaders one of another. You're replaceable to one another. Right? It's similar to the statement of Amr bin Rabi'a, when he was asked, when his famous, his clause that we are here, when he went to the Persian commander, and he said, why are you people here? He said, I'm here, and his famous manifesto, it's one of the manifestos of Islam. So I'm here to take our people from the slavery of people to the slavery of God, from the narrowness of this world to the vastness of this world in the hereafter. And he said, after he listened to this eloquent speech, the Persian emperor or the commander, he said, are you the leader of your people? And he said, no, but we are leaders one of another. So this type of egalitarianism was never actually known in the world before Islamic history. Now we know that there's accountability, people, democracy, some aspects have been taken, but this actually initiated from Islam itself in that kind of way, which was actually very looked down upon by the West in the early days of Islam. How is the king equal to the layman, to the order? Okay, so this is a very important principle of the Islamic thing, that vicegerency is actually an obligation upon all of them. They're all khulafa of Allah. Okay, now this one is no legislation. Number 3, no legislation shall be other than the Quran and Sunnah. And this has often been said as no legislation shall be other than repugnant to the Quran and Sunnah, as is mentioned in the Pakistani constitution, right? No legislation shall be made repugnant to the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay? This is derived from many ayahs in the Quran. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Whoever does not rule by what Allah has sent down, such are the disbelievers. And other examples are Surah Al-Hujurat, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُقَدِّمُوا بَيْنَ يَدِي اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله إن الله سميع عليم. Okay, all you who believe, do not go ahead of Allah and His Messenger. Okay, and what this means, لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله, it means that do not go ahead of them in legislation, go in making laws. Okay, but the actual context, right, is about when you speak. Why did the Constitution of Pakistan create this term, not repugnant to the Quran Sunnah, not contradicting the Quran Sunnah, instead of saying the Quran Sunnah will be the law. Okay, this is a very important point, by the way. This was raised by Maulana Abdul Aziz, but he was shot down because of other political reasons, right? But this is a very valid point. So, during my research on this topic, I found that it's kind of incorrect to say that law should be made repugnant to the Quran, not repugnant to the Quran Sunnah. Okay, why? Because this kind of puts Quran Sunnah in a corner and creates a vastness of law. Okay, whereas Quran and Sunnah is actually a vast body. It contains a lot of principles, where you should look into you should look into the Quran and Sunnah first, and then derive whatever you can from there. And then if you cannot find something for suppose there's some new technology out there, and you're trying to assess what's the ruling on this technology, right? Or and some new thing that doesn't. So you're going to look for the principles in the Quran and Sunnah, and then you're going to try to make a decision and make a law pertaining to it. Into the Quranic text and the text of the Hadith, they weigh the thing and they apply it to the modern problem and the modern issue at hand. Okay. Now, if this is not available, which would be a very minority of the case, okay, it should not contradict the principles and the text of the Quran. Now, let's give an example of this. This is very interesting, right? I was listening to this discussion on this topic, and it was a scholar with another brother who was kind of questioning him in this video. And he said, for example, if the state wants to make legislation on the building statutes, issue statutes regarding building law, like how tall the buildings are going to be, and how many rooms they should have. This is not contradicting. So Quran Sunnah, which is fine, right? So he actually said he smiled. He said actually Islam has something to say about that as well, because it depends on how close they are to each other and how the height should protect the privacy of the other buildings and the other. So even that Islam covered, right? So you can see the expansiveness of the Quran Sunnah. But the intention needs to be that you look into Quran Sunnah first as A, and then as B. If the case does arise, then yes, we are open to open ijtihad based on certain rulings that do not contradict the Quran Sunnah. Point number 4. Settlement of matters by shura, consultation. Okay, the Islamic government must decide its important matters based on consultation. Islam teaches us to run a government, to make legislation, not to derive legislation rather, and decisions by the process of shura. Shura means to take decisions by consultation and participation. As Allah SWT says in Surah Al-Imran, okay, take shura from them, and this is what exactly Prophet ﷺ did before the Battle of Uhud. He took a shura from his council, from the people of Ahl wal-Aqd, people of understanding and people of knowledge. And he took their gathering, he took their opinion. And is it possible to So settlement of matters by shura, consultation, right? So this is found in Surah Shura as well as Surah Al-Imran, where the Prophet is being told to consult the people, consult his followers for this. And of course, the Prophet is being told whose opinion will be better than the Prophet, right? But even he is being told to consult. And even and others say that this is such a pleasing thing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even when He's going to create mankind, He consulted with the angels. He told the angels what He's going to do. Okay, this is an important part of the Islamic political system. Very important, right? But this is, however, not to be mixed and understood with democracy. Ultimately, the executive has the decision on which opinion to go with, which is not the same in a democratic order, where obviously it's going to be the majority, right? Now there's no clear. But I do say this, but there is no clear cut on this. Sometimes you can have majority, you can have a shura with majority decision being the ultimate decision. This can happen. Okay, it's not a hard and fast rule, and you can have it based on majority principle, right? But what I want you guys to know is this group of people, this community, which is known as Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd, those qualified to elect or dispose a caliph on behalf of the Muslim community. So their responsibility not only is to the caliph to take shura from them, but actually this is the body which even has the executive rights to remove the caliph. If they come together and they realize this caliph is not, he's not doing things accordingly, he's not working properly, he can be removed by this.
By the shura.
By this Hal wal-Aqd. Okay. Accountability of the government, which moves us to the next point, which is about the accountability of the caliph. See, the principles of the Islamic structure is that accountability is a very key part of this. Okay, we think this is coming from democracy, right? Nowadays, this is what we're brainwashed with, right? These are coming with that it was the Magna Carta and all of this happened, and then the world got enlightened by the principles of accountability, and power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So these type of things, but was always there in the Islamic order, right? Both the ruler and the ruled are the Khalifa of Allah. That's the first thing to understand. And the ruler shall have to work for the people, the welfare of the people, according to the Quran and Sunnah. A ruler is a servant of the people in Islam. His title is he's in service. He's a government employee. He is the government, but he's an employee of the people. An ordinary citizen of the Islamic State has the right to ask any question on any matter to the ruler and the government. Okay. This is a very the checks and balances are great there. Okay. Now this is an interesting just to show where we're getting these laws from, these rules from, these principles, is actually what happened in the time of Umar ibn Khattab. One time he ascended the pulpit and he says, he said, listen to me, wata'ani, and obey me. And Abu Zar, I believe it was, he said, we will not listen to you and we will not obey you. And he said, what happened? And he said, you are wearing 2 garments from the clothes that came from Yemen, whereas we are wearing 1. So where did you get your second piece? Okay. So then he told his son Abdul Rahman to rise up, and he said, my father is a very tall man, so I gave him mine to cover himself. And then he said, now we will obey and listen. So any ordinary citizen, and at this point he had no government authority, just a regular person, he stood up and he checked the Khalifa at the time. And the Khalifa was responsible to give him an answer. Principle number 6, independence of the judiciary. In the Islamic political system, the judiciary is independent of the executive. Okay? These are principles that came from Islam. We think that we attribute them now to the modern democratic state. But this is actually Islamic principle. One of the main functions of the Islamic state is to ensure justice to all citizens. The ruler and the government has no right to interfere in the system of justice. Okay? And there's numerous examples of this. One of the most famous examples is
The Jew.
the independence of the that one I'll use it for another thing. That's more for the rule of law. But independence of judiciary, you can come into that they can't really affect any decision made by the thing. They're completely separate. Now, Mahkam al-Mazalim, Mahkamat al-Mazalim. This is the highest court in the Islamic order. Okay, it talks about it's a court of injustices, and this court has the right to impeach the caliph. So this Mahkam al-Mazalim has a right to impeach the caliph of the time. Equality before the law. Okay, this one we will talk about the case of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Okay, when he was the caliph of his time, a Jewish man, he made a claim that this shield, that Ali has, is mine. And the justice of the court, the judge at the time, he said, "Oh Jewish man, bring your case." And he said to Ali, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, bring your case." And Amir al-Mu'mineen, he said that this is my shield, and he has it in his possession, and I lost it on that battle, and here's my son Hassan to testify. And Hassan And Hassan said, yes, I'm here. And he said, what's your relation to Hassan? He says, my son. No, you cannot be accepted. Your son says, no, will not be accepted. And he said, Ashra, he's from the youth of Al-Jannah. Prophet said. He said, no. A son's testimony will not be accepted in favor of his father. And then he looked and he ruled in the favor of the Jewish man. He said, the shield belongs to you. Because the Islamic principle is that the person making the claim has to bring the evidence. So the claim, it was in the possession of the Jewish man, and Ali ibn Abi Talib is making the claim that it's his. So he has to bring evidence that it's his. So because of this, the judge, he ruled that it's in the favor of the Jewish man. Ali ibn Abi Talib was unhappy. And he said, yeah, and the judge later after judgment passed, he said, yeah, what makes you unhappy? You know, I'm tied by the rules of the Sharia. I have to treat you equally before the Sharia. And he said, no, I'm not happy. I'm not upset about that. You kept on referring to me as Amir al-Mu'mineen, whereas you kept on referring to him as the Jewish man. So you should have been just in the way you saw the case between us. Okay. So this shows you the equality before the law, and this was unknown to the world at this time. This was a concept introduced by Islam. Okay, now controversial one: rights of non-Muslims and Muslims. The Islamic State is a faith-based society. Okay, no one has any superiority above anything except the taqwa, right? The ajam over the ghair ajam, the white over the black, the red over the yellow. No one has any superiority. He said that your likeness is like before the law, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is like the teeth of a comb. They're all equal, right? And so what is this? But the only distinction Islam makes is upon non-Muslims. They're not included in this equality. This is a state for the believers. Okay. Now, what does that actually entail? Although it sounds very oppressive, it's not. They give them complete freedom to live their lives and to be a protected minority. The Prophet also said, whoever hurts or injures a dhimmi is the person who's paying the jizya and is living under Islamic law. Whoever hurts him has hurt me. Who's caused him harm has caused me harm. So taking that it's his responsibility, the Islamic State's responsibility to keep them, and of course the right of life, the right of dignity, the right of property, the right of in today's terms we can even think of the right of education. This can be added in modern day. This has become almost a right of life, right? So these type of things can be all given to them. What can they not have? Where the equality doesn't exist, they cannot have a right to rule. They cannot be part of the government. Because of course the government is Islamic government. How can they rule on when they're not even accepting of those laws, right? So this is the leadership status cannot be given to them.
But there's a lot of Islamic banks. They have non-Muslims.
Yeah. But we're not living in Islam.
What about the right?
No, but one more thing. So one more thing I want to say about the Islamic bank comment was that this is specifically talking about the government. Okay. Minor institutions inside might not be the same thing. It doesn't mean that a manager at work cannot be a non-Muslim. I'm talking about in the government.
What about
ruling body.
their right to? Do they have the right to operate around businesses within their community, like selling alcohol, or?
I'll refrain from this because I don't know.
But they're allowed to practice a religion as they see it.
Yeah, I will ask about that.
I don't think that even alcohol is permissible in their own religion.
Whatever, but if they believe they have their own understanding of a religion and they want to practice it that way, would the Islamic State allow that?
From what I know of history, I think they were allowed to do
Okay.
within their community.
Within their-
yeah, but it doesn't mean they can go sell to outside or something. But I'll find out for you. Okay. The ninth principle: this Islamic State, this embodiment, doesn't have any internal boundaries. Okay. What I mean by that is. Sorry, this is more of a. I just got the graph last one. This is a conflict zone graph, and all these conflict areas in the world, right? But anyways, what I'm trying to explain is that if this is the Islamic world, there's no internal boundaries, like the EU, right? There's no visa, there's no passport within the boundaries of the Islamic world, right? There is external boundaries, however, between that Islamic Confederation and the non-Islamic. So a good example would be like the EU, for example.
But then the access to that state is through you being a Muslim, or is that
Yes.
because you were born in that state and therefore?
No, access will be through you, and there cannot be any boundaries between you. if you want to go as a Muslim, your passport is La ilaha illallah. So you just travel with that and you go to any within the Confederate States.
That's just, the nationalism is the thing. If you try to avoid, that's
Yeah,
what we don't.
it doesn't Islam does not recognize any nationalism. Distinctions from other forms of government. Okay, this will really try to now get you guys in the motion. Kingship or dictatorship. Now, what is, like I said, our vision of a caliph is one supreme leader, and he's more or less a king or a dictator. This is our misconception of what Islamic caliphate is to be. So, what are the some of the differences between the actual principles and this type of government? Number one is the selection is by the believers. It's by the people. Selection of this caliph, of this amir, is by the people. Okay, as opposed to what the Christian Judeo tradition used to be, that we are kings because by the order of God. Okay, by the vested in from the Pope and the vested in, we are appointed by God, or that type of notion. There's a divine right, and there's many books on the divine right of kings. It's a famous book, right? So this concept is important. Is that the caliph is actually chosen by the people. His selection is by the people, which is it almost sounds like a very democratic concept, but this is actually how Islamic. And through what? Through the bay'ah, through the pledge. That they came and they come in and they pledge to you. Now, in a modern state, can it be through some type of election? This is again something that probably can be the case with its rulings and with its numerous checks and balances on authority. The kingship he's the ultimate body, right? And he's the legislator. It's by the king's decree that something will happen, right? By do this or do that. But in an Islamic state, it's not he's not the legislator, right? He is just an executive governing the system. Okay, this is a very important distinction. And we just talked about the numerous checks and balances on his authority. They can impeach him, as well as the chief justice, and that Madalim court can also impeach the caliph. Now, with democracy, one more thing. So the government, the ruler, in the case of a kingship, the people are to serve him, right? His kingdom, right? This is the concept, right? His queen, his majesty, we're the servants of his majesty. Complete opposite concept. The king, the ruler, the caliph is the servant of the people. Okay, this is how the concept works. Now, democracy. What is the first thing that comes to your mind? That is democracy allowable in this context? So many democratic principles are inside of Islam. What do you think? What is the key distinction? What is the key thing that comes to your mind when you think, no, this is not democracy?
The decisions is with the majority rather than the people.
So the people are assumed as
Yeah, but what's the word to say?
sovereign.
Sovereign, yeah. The sovereignty belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rule number one. Right? Principle number one. Here the sovereignty belongs to Parliament.
Yeah.
Okay? The House of Lords, the House of Gods, right? The House of so basically they're making legislation from their own whims. Okay? Not deriving them from the Sharia. Okay? So this is the key difference. And so in Islamic terms, it's a trust. The people who are in charge of deriving law, these are people this is a trust upon them. Okay? They're not sovereigns. Okay? Parliament can't legislate but derive rulings and legislation. And there's some differences in the bay'ah and the election system as well. Okay? I don't want to get too much into it because it is a little complicated, and I don't want to make something haram which is not haram. Okay. So in today's world, what will this political order look like? This would look like something like this. We have an amir who's basically considered to be the CEO of the government. Okay. Then you have the judiciary, and they have certain laws. Their laws are to take care of the daily justices between people, to enact rulings, and to also act as check and balance upon the emir. Okay, if he does anything wrong, then they can immediately question him and also impeach him ultimately. And Halwa al-Aqd, they also can impeach the caliph, and they have the responsibility of choosing the caliph in terms of succession and other issues.
That's the upper house. Right?
That's the upper house. Okay, and between them as well, there is if these guys come up with the derived legislation that is against the rulings of Islam, the judiciary can then overrule.
And same with the judiciary can give some decision, can they rule?
Yes.
Should they all
Shura and the executive can.
Should they all be scholars?
Okay, now this is another thing which I didn't want to get into, but okay, you asked the question. Scholars. Now, there is a requirement of Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd. Even the word, it means that these are people, Ahl al-Hal, and these people are people, capable people. That the terminology means a group of capable individuals. Okay? So they have, necessarily they have to have capabilities in Islam. But that doesn't mean they are just one-dimensional, as in they are just capable in Islam and they don't have any understanding of how the world works or other matters. So so that bench or that group must have a group which has basically technocrats as well as people who are Islamically learned. And if the same personalities are there that have both Islamic understandings as well as how they're expressed in their own field, specialized in the field, then that would be the best scenario. So yes, these Ahl wal Aqd are definitely scholars. Judiciary, of course, they're scholars. They have to derive, they have to judge between people, and always they have to be just. There's many characteristics that they must entail. And of course, the Amir has to have some authority to be from this. Usually, the Amir will be from the Ahl world, as the situation was when Umar Khattab was passing away, and he said, okay, choose 6 of you, choose one between you. And Uthman radiallahu anhu was chosen.
So there's something called a Shura Council as well, right?
Yeah.
Does that exist in one of these bodies or separate?
Now, I think that's separate. Okay, I believe that's separate.
It's an advisory council.
It's an advisory council to the
See,
to the Amir.
There is no term limit, right? Is it reaching any of the Islamic?
Now, the term limit thing, when Mudassir talked about it, he actually talked about having a term limit to this. But it was something we were going back and forth with. All these things, when you're looking to implement in the modern world, then you can come up with such things. I don't know if this is, but then again, you have to look into whether it's the Islamic law allows it, doesn't allow it, what's the reasons for it. So you have to kind of look into that.
I think the premise is just look for capable leadership, right? So as long as that's happening.
Yeah, but you can't. It doesn't mean to say that it doesn't make it haram to put a term to it. Maybe 10 years. It doesn't make it haram to do so.
There was the functions of
No, yeah. So the ideal concept from us is that our ideal is the rightly guided character, right? For Rushda, right? So when you look at that ideal, you don't find this there.
there is no time condition in that. They have been removed, they have been killed,
Okay, distinguishing features of the Sharia. Now, why am I talking about this now? Because we talked about Islamic political order. Now we're going to the second phase of today's talk. Second phase of today's talk, so I want you guys get a feel of, we talked about the principles, right? But how does that look like? I want you guys now to engage in an exercise of envisioning, of dreaming, that tomorrow, if Islamic, Islamic political order is established, what would life look like for us? Okay. So what are the key features, distinguishing features about the Sharia compared to other laws that are prevalent today? Firstly, we talked about the 10 Commandments. Okay, and there's a hikmah behind this, right? We said that if you follow the 10 Commandments, it's always been consistent throughout the ages. To the Jewish, Christian law, all the previous Anbiya. These seem to be the general principles that are acceptable to people. Now, Islam comes and just takes that a step further. And it says, okay, don't commit zina. How is Islam going to solve the problem of zina in society? It says, okay, the women must cover themselves. The men must lower their gazes. There should be segregation of the sexes as much as possible in the workplace, right? And by doing so, you're preserving the family unit. So Islam now not only prescribes the law, but gives the process of implementation of that objective, which is the 10 Commandments or the objective, right? Then qisas. Suppose you take another one, which is murder. How to avoid this? How to avoid crime in general? So Islam says qisas. Civil law is to be done by qisas. The harm you cause the other is the harm to be retributed to you, whether that's in monetary terms or unmonetary. So this is how Islam prescribes, right? An eye for an eye concept, but then you can take that concept further and say that Islam's way of dealing with civil issues is harm for harm. Okay? And that is to be retribution, the law of retribution.
And they can even forgive. Current
and they can be forgiven.
laws doesn't give that right to forgive.
Forgiveness. Civil law. We're talking about civil law. We're talking about civil issues between citizens. Right? So these type of things, there is a pardoning of. Now the hudud, these are the limits. Okay? These are crimes against the state. These are maybe open acts of terrorism. You would say mass murder. You would say maybe armed robbery. These type of acts. There's hudud punishment. There's a thing, and this is an exemplary punishment, a deterrent. Okay? This is what makes Islam's thing, and these are what you usually get the headlines: cutting of the hand, and the thief, the punishment of the zani. Now, when all of these things are implemented, and two people commit zina in a way that is witnessed by 4 people, okay, then to implement the hudud, it sounds like they deserve it, right? I mean, so many protections were there in society. You know, the propagation of trying to get ease of marriage, and then the propagation of trying to save yourself from the segregation of the sexes, and then still you managed to commit zina in a way that was witnessed by four Muslims. So you did it in a public manner. Now you deserve to be punished. So you deserve the hudud. So this is what the hudud. These are limits. Okay, and yeah, hijab is a very key aspect of that. So continuing with our vision, let's look at what life would look like in Islam. Okay, because if you can't envision it, it's not going to happen. Now let's talk about political order. A political order which is where the rulers consider themselves as slaves of the people and slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine that. Okay, just imagine a government. Imagine that our rulers, those guys sitting in those mansions, flying across regions just to eat a type of food. So these type of people, imagine if their ideology changes and they are serving the people. They are now serving the people. And this is what Umar Khattab used to say. Right? Again, back to our ideal. He said, and he was in a state of deep sleep, and he was like very tired, exhausted. And I said, why don't you go to sleep? And he said, it was during the day. And he said, how can I go to sleep during the day when I have duties to the people? Right? I'm responsible for the duties. And how can I go to sleep during the night when I have duties to stand before Allah? So these type of personalities, that's what we talk about in leadership, right? Yusuf bin Tashfin, when he this is from the Murabitun movement in the northwest. Right? When these guys took over the palaces of the Muslim kings at that time, and I forget the name of the king at that time, and they took the palace over, and he says, he lives like this every day. Like, I can't imagine this luxury for one day, and I can't imagine this guy lives in this luxury every day with 1,000 servants and this, that. And again, he brought back that humility concept, that concept of serving the people back into a society where neighbors are concerned about each other, the problems of real brotherhood. Today we live in a neighborhood we don't even know the other guy's name. Honestly, I don't know the guy's name. How many of you know the names of your neighbors? All of them? None of them. So imagine a society where you're meeting regularly for salah. Okay? Everyone is coming for salah. It's a congregation. 5 times a day you are meeting everyone. Everything, all the shops, everything closes for salah. There's a brotherhood that's going to be. You're going to talk about your problems. You're going to mutually come together. You're going to talk about issues. That type of society. Imagine a judiciary based on the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, one of the laws of Umar, it's been termed as the Umar law. Go and do some research, you'll find it. It says that the justice, the court, must give its rulings within 2 weeks. 10 days to 15 days. Okay, but 10 days the first decision, and 5 more days for the appeal court or something. Okay, contrast that with what we have in these days. Has anybody had a court case? Anyone knows how long it takes?
Still going on 2 years.
2 years. See? And I'm probably these court cases they go on for decades. Situations actually, people have died, lost the people who are claiming for inheritance. They end up dying, and they don't get their rightful right.
The law is.
So imagine that the part of the judiciary is to make summary courts. It's not 15-day justices. Imagine the things that would enhance the life, that would make easy. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Right? This is the famous quote of Martin Luther. An economy based on sadaqah and not riba. Imagine that. Okay, and this is what I'm saying. Imagining it. This is we have a golden past. We had a time where people would the people would go to give sadaqah and no one would take it. They all were content. What strikes me about this situation that happened in the time of the Umayyads was not that people weren't actually was not the fact that people were giving and not taking. Is that how much, doesn't matter today how rich you are, if you still get more money, you still take it. The level of contentment, and that only comes from the other aspect of Islam, which is that spiritual aspect. It's that contentment. You're only taking what you need. Okay?
Wasn't it also because zakat was taken by force,
it was implemented. It was taken. The rule of zakat, the 2.5%, was now taken from the people, the wealthy. So yeah, there's a good distribution of wealth. That's very important.
They were giving it themselves, but anybody who was not implementing that,
Then they were taking.
then they would take it by forcefully. Otherwise, they
There
were
is
giving it.
centralized methodology to take it. That's
Yeah,
it.
of course. There's this particular department responsible for zakat collection. So this type of government, and Allah SWT says He's going to enhance any society. Allah increases sadaqah and He destroys riba. Today's society is built upon riba, right? Allah says He will enhance a society which is built upon sadaqah, and this is being proven. There's I forget the guy's name. He practiced this in Pakistan. He started microfinancing people. Okay. And he did it based on, after he established a person's business by microfinancing him, he would then say, okay, now you give a sadaqah to some portion of your wealth to the next guy, to the pool of money we have for investment purposes. So then, this way he created a whole network of people giving their sadaqah, giving portion of the sadaqah, all based on the initial sadaqah. And he said we could never imagine the increase Allah SWT gave to him. And it was much more than you would imagine for a system based on riba. Like, because we got instead of we got 100% increase in months in our pool of wealth pool, just by applying these concepts. So imagine a whole society built upon these principles. They used to say about Abdurrahman bin Auf, who was a very wealthy Sahaba, one of the 10 given that tidings of Jannah. He said at one point he was so wealthy that half of Medina he had given debts to, and they would be running their businesses based from his wealth, and half of Medina he actually just given charity. So this is a type, and so see, Islam provides the perfect solution, because it doesn't say what capitalism says, that just focus on the greed. It doesn't say what socialism says, is that just don't worry about individual greed, and which is negate your individual needs and just think about the greater good, right? It's a merger where the wealthy still has motivation to expand his business, still has motivation to take up entrepreneurship and enhance new investments, but at the same time he's giving proportionally of his stored income, right? Which is distributing that wealth. So it's providing the perfect balance in your motivations. An education system based on both views of both worlds. Okay, imagine now your children will get not just tarbiyah, they also get ta'lim. Sorry, not just ta'lim, they also get tarbiyah. Okay, imagine they go to a school where they're being taught how to respect their elders, and they're being taught how to learn, how to expand and learn. So imagine a world like this. And the last thing I want to say is that it's not just about us as Muslims. Okay, ultimately, it's our responsibility to humanity. Okay. Our responsibility to humanity is not just, we're living in a world today where I don't want to give numbers, but a very minute percentage of the world's population is enjoying a great vast majority of the world's resources.
So it's getting further and further.
And it's getting further and further. I think in the 90s this used to be something like, the rates were something around 80%. 80% resources are going to around 2% of the world's population. And it's expanding, this difference. You have the solution. You have a system of running the world, which is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you have a responsibility to go and try to implement this as a solution for humanity's problems. And what are you doing? You're sitting like the snake on the treasure. Not doing it yourself and not letting anybody else come in. Okay? So this is why the responsibility upon us is not just for us, but it's also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ لُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best people taken out for mankind. Okay. This is why, because if you do this, then your scale increases. You're going to answer society's problems. You're there for benefit of humanity. Linnas, for people, not against the people, not over the people. That's it today, and inshallah, hope it was a beneficial lesson. Akhir da'wana, alhamdulillah.